The topic today is how to sell during a global pandemic. The few things I want to talk to you about today is first, finding the right tone in this challenging time. I think that's pretty important. A couple thoughts on shifting more towards virtual selling versus traditional selling. How you might be able to modify your message, modify your sales message, and then wrap up with talking about just a couple objections that are likely to come up, given the times that we're in. So to start out, let's first start out with talking about how to find that right tone. And the first step, I believe, really in finding the tone that you should use in any scenario of selling, whether you're changing from one buyer to another or you're in a challenging sales situation, I always believe the first step is to try to understand the prospect. I mean, this could be the target prospect, it could be the gatekeeper or whoever you're interacting with when you're selling. But if we try to understand what's going on with the people that we're interacting with during a global pandemic, well, the first thing is that if you're doing B2B selling, the businesses that you're trying to reach out to and sell to, it's very likely that they're fighting for survival. I mean, there are some businesses that are booming right now, but most likely the businesses that you're interacting with, there are headwinds that they are facing. They could just be fighting to stay alive. They could be in the process of going out of business, or there could be businesses on your target list that have already gone out of business. And one thing that you should really always keep in mind is that the people that you're selling to, there's a very good chance that they are worried about their job. I mean, we're all worried about the performance of the companies we work for, the performance of the companies we own. There can always be a sense of insecurity regarding one's job, and that is definitely increased in today's climate. Not only are the people that you're selling to worried about maybe losing their job or their company going out of business, but they're probably also worried about their own health and the safety and their own safety, especially if they're in the office and you're calling them at the office and they're forced into some sort of work situation where maybe they don't feel completely safe. They might be worried about that, and they might be worried about their families. Maybe they're sending their kids back to school, or there's just all sorts of things that they worry about with their family, either providing from a financial standpoint or the health and safety of their partners and their kids. And so there's just a tremendous increased level of stress. So with all that going on, if we kind of understand all that and put ourselves in the prospect's shoes, that takes one step forward to helping us to figure out the right tone and balance to use when talking to prospects. And the reason why this is important, and I don't think that this is the case right now, but I remember when the pandemic first started, I heard some salespeople that were worried about outreach. That it was insensitive to reach out to someone with people dying and with businesses failing and so much worrying going on. And so if we kind of put a spectrum up here with a far on one side, an extreme way to handle this in terms of tone, and the complete opposite, on the left side, let's just view this as the tone and the approach where we're overly worried about the prospect. So we might not contact them. I think we've all kind of realized that this is the new normal for now, and salespeople are more comfortable doing outreach, and everybody's trying to get back to business. So I don't think that's such an issue. But when you're on this far extreme, one thing I've noticed being a prospect that for many salespeople that salespeople send me emails every day. I get a lot of emails where I think the salespeople talk too much about the virus and the pandemic. In that, for example, the first part of their email will, tell me that they hope I'm doing okay, and that they'll ask me how I'm doing, and they'll talk about the pandemic in the beginning of the email. Then the body of the email, they'll kind of go back to just trying to sell me and do their product selling. And then the end of the email, they'll wrap up with trying to tell me to stay safe and all this. So I personally think that's an extreme and talking about the pandemic too much. Now if we look at the other extreme, which would be just to kind of completely ignore that there's anything that we're living through at this particular time and operate it as with business as usual. Don't mention the virus, don't even talk about it, and just act like everything's normal. So if we put those as two extremes, my recommendation for trying to find the right tone would be to try to be somewhere in the middle. And I think usually trying to be somewhere in the middle of any two extremes in any particular situation, especially when you're trying to figure out how to handle a situation in terms of interpersonal dynamics or communications, I think it's always good to try to end up in the middle, right? So it'll depend on you and your style, how you incorporate that. But I personally would say, don't talk about, don't send a sentence that hope you're doing well in this challenging time, and how is it how is it impacting you? I've had a lot of salespeople that send me emails asking what the impact of the virus is on me or in my business. So I would stray away from that, but then I think there is a way to incorporate the virus into in this current world that we're living in into your sales approach and into your message, and I'll talk about that later in the slide presentation. Just want to share a couple things about shifting more towards virtual selling. I think at this point we've all kind of implemented a lot of what I'm going to share with you, but maybe there's one of these things that you really haven't thought about or you haven't taken that step. So maybe what I'll share with you will be a reminder. If not, maybe one or two of them may be something new for you to think about. The first thing to think about with shifting more from traditional selling to virtual selling is that there's a sales process. There's a sales process whether you are the feet on the street and walking around and meeting with people in person, or you're doing everything virtually. And the reality is that the sales process can be exactly the same, and that's what I want to point out to you. So I recommend that you take your prospects through three main sales process steps. The first step is initial contact. So this is reaching out to someone either over the phone, through email, social media, could be networking or cold walking, and then you try to drive those initial contact interactions to selling a meeting. So a meeting would be more of an established conversation, and that could take place over the phone, could take place in face-to-face meetings or online meetings, and then you try to drive those meetings and close those meetings for some more formal presentation where you're sharing how you can help the prospect, and that would be face-to-face meetings or online meetings. And so if we just kind of modify this sales process to the pandemic, we need to remove networking and cold walking. So we still have the phone and email, but now we're shifting more towards phone sales and email prospecting. From a meeting standpoint, we just eliminate face-to-face meetings, but we can definitely do phone conversations, online meetings, and in terms of delivering our presentations, we're just going to do online meetings. So the main takeaway here is that you can use the same sales process and just modify it a bit, and everything leans more towards those virtual types of interactions. Now, the tools that you might want to use leaning more towards virtual, maybe you haven't taken this step, but because you're going to be doing more work over the phone, I recommend you have a cold call script, some type of cold call guide ready and in your hand or in your head already. But now it's more important than ever because you're going to be doing more work over the phone. And whether you use a cold call script or not, at a minimum, you should have good questions to ask. And again, this should apply whether there is no pandemic or there is. But since you're really operating more virtually, you need to be more efficient and precise. And having good questions to ask will help you with that. You definitely need objection responses, again, in any scenario. But you're going to face specific objections for the pandemic, and you should have responses for those, and we'll talk about those here towards the end of this presentation. I mentioned your sales efforts and prospecting are going to lean more towards phone and email. Email is more important now than ever because, for one reason, every year things slide more towards prospecting using email. It's even more important now because if you're doing B2B selling, a lot of the prospects that you sell to are actually offline or working at home or off-site. So in some instances, now more than ever, email is going to be one of the main ways to find and communicate with people. Because you're going to lean more on email now, you're going to need a way to get prospects' email addresses. And I just want to show you, this is one of our tools. We provide a tool called the Email Guesser. And I just want to show you this real quick. So we have a tool called Email Guesser. And basically my philosophy has always been, if I know someone's first name, last name, and where they work, if I know where they work, I know their company website address. If they have a website, most businesses do. If I have those three values, I can guess someone's email address because I'm going to mix and match those three values, and one of those combinations is going to be their email. So we've developed a tool here that runs a bunch of different combinations of those three values and does sort of a test ping, and the ping will come back and tell you which one of those combinations is the correct email address. So when you're operating in a more virtual selling world where you're relying more on email than ever, using some sort of tool to guess and get email addresses could be a big help. And I always recommend using some sort of tool for email automation. Certainly you can send your email templates through Outlook or through whatever inbox tool you use, but automating email is one of the easiest things you can do. It's basically like cloning yourself. So subscribing to some piece of software that allows you to automate the delivery of emails, allows you to send multiple emails to multiple people, send multiple emails out at the same time to a list of prospects with some sort of mail merge. It's very easy to do. If you haven't done that already, now is a good time to implement something like that. Of course, some sort of virtual screen share tool. You probably already have something like that already, but here are a couple. Something you might not have thought of is if you need to get prospects to agree to a document or signature or contract and you need to close deals virtually, you might want to look at a tool like DocuSign. Makes it real easy to close deals over the phone or over screen share. So check that out. Email marketing, now's a good time if you haven't implemented something. So just some reminders of virtual selling tools that you might want to think about. Now let's talk about how to modify your sales message given the climate that we're trying to operate in. If you've attended any of our webinars in the past, you know that we have many sales training videos and we've done many sessions on building your sales message. So I'm not going to go through that in detail, and if you don't know, go back to our other videos. But our message building process is to start with your product, identify the target buyer for your sales message, identify the value that when your product or service is provided to that particular type of buyer, what are the improvements that they can see, what are the pain points you can help to make go away, what are some questions to ask, probably questions that identify if the prospect has the pain that you can help to fix, what is an example of a previous customer or client that you've helped. Going through those steps is the process that we take you through, or that we provide you, that you can use to build your sales message. So where we can start to modify whatever message you've created is by looking at the value part of your sales message. And so just a very light example of some value points, might be, we help businesses to decrease costs, improve profitability, increase sales. Of course, that's very generic. So if I was creating a sales message for you, even if you do those three benefits, I would fluff that up a bit, like decrease costs through just-in-time inventory, or whatever more details you can add to that, kind of to fluff it up. So I wouldn't use that, but for demo purposes, I'm just keeping those points really short and simple. If you had some sort of structure of a value points or value proposition like that, what you could do is, if your benefits help a business, maybe in the area of business improvements like improving costs, improving profitability, improving sales, whatnot, then what you could do is you could associate those benefits with helping that business with their approach to dealing with. For example, if a business is dealing with decreased foot traffic and decreased sales or being shut down or whatever the case, maybe the product or service that you sell will help indirectly with those challenges. So for example, if you help to decrease costs or improve profitability or increase sales, even knowing what you sell does not necessarily help with COVID-19. You could make a connection there and modify your value proposition to say, we help businesses to minimize the impacts of the virus by decreasing costs, improving profitability, increasing sales. So just a minor modification there that associates your value with the challenges that are the biggest priority for them at this particular moment. We could do that same sort of modification to your sales message if you've brainstormed some pain points that you help with. So if you help businesses to, if you help to resolve the pain points for businesses that it's difficult to decrease costs, profitability is not what it needs to be, sales growth is not where it needs to be, stuff like that. And again, this is just a rough example, but what you could do is you could modify those in the same exact way to say, a lot of businesses we work with have concerns about the virus making it difficult to decrease costs, decreasing the level of profitability and preventing sales growth. And so that becomes the pain points part of your sales message. And so when you modify your sales message, again, there's previous training webinars that go through how to create those 4 pieces of content. We actually refer to those as building blocks. And then you can use those building blocks to create emails and call scripts. But here's an example of using a cold email that we've provided in previous training modules and modify it to be more indirectly connected to the pandemic. So, the intro to the email might say, the reason for the email is that we are helping small businesses minimize the impacts of the virus by, and then you list out some of the improvements. I don't know if you want to improve those areas, and that's why I'm reaching out. You could do the same thing with pain points. So the reason for the email is that a lot of small businesses that we work with are having challenges with the virus making it difficult for this and challenging for that and difficult for this. I don't know if you're concerned about those areas, and that's why I'm reaching out. So again, not a revolutionary thought. I'm just trying to give you ideas of how to modify your message to bring in the pandemic. This hopefully just gives you ideas that you can build on, right? I'm not saying that this is a perfect email or that this is the only change that you should make, but I'm just trying to give you ideas to build off. And by the way, I think this is better than saying, I hope you're doing okay given the virus and the pandemic and the challenging times, or stay safe. I think telling them how you can help them to get through the virus is more impactful than you showing your sympathy or your empathy, or that you care and that you're telling them to stay safe. I think when that comes from salespeople, and especially when you see it in emails all day, and then that also makes your emails longer in terms of word count, I would lean away from that and try to talk about the virus in this way. That's just a couple ways that you can modify your cold email messages. Here's how you can modify your call script. So on the left side here are the different building blocks that we put together to create a cold call script. There's a different training module that goes through building this cold call script and how to use this and bounce from one section to another. I'm just skipping ahead to the second step of the cold call, which is stating the purpose of the call. And so if you modify your message to be more connected to the pandemic, you could say, when you get to stating the purpose of your call, the reason for my call is we're helping small businesses to minimize the impacts of the virus, and we're doing that by improving this, decreasing that, and you could also use your pain points as the purpose of the call. The reason for my call is a lot of small businesses that we work with are having challenges with the virus, making it difficult to do this and difficult to do that, and they're worried about this. And then you move to the next step of the sales script, which is the sales takeaway, which is where you might say something like, but I don't know if those are concerns for you or not, and that's why I'm reaching out. Those are just some tips on how to modify your message and then how to modify some of your different scripts and emails. And the last thing I want to talk to you about are just a few objections that can come up with regarding the virus. So one thing is that it's very likely that you might end up getting a prospect on the phone or exchange emails with them, and they're shut down. I mean, imagine selling to restaurants, and it's very likely you could end up on the phone with a prospect, and they use this objection to get rid of you. I mean, it's pretty easy, right? Well, no reason for us to talk to you, Mr. or Mrs. Salesperson. We're currently shut down. Here's a way to reply to that. Oh, I understand, and I want you to know I'm actually not trying to sign you up for anything or sell you anything at this difficult time. I'm simply trying to open the dialogue between our two companies. While you all are shut down, are you available for a brief conversation to discuss how we are? And then you could insert your value proposition. You could even insert your value proposition that's tailored to the pandemic. You could say, are you available for a brief conversation where we could discuss how we are working with small businesses and helping them to deal with the pandemic by creating more profitability and improving their cost structure? The way and then moving on to the last sentence here in the response. That way, once we get back to normal and you all open back up, you can know who we are and how we can help. So I refer to this as kind of a deflection. You're deflecting to your sales process, because if you recall, a couple slides ago, I went through the sales process, and the sales process is not to sell the product right now when you're doing prospecting. Your sales process is just to sell the conversation. So this objection response is just deflecting back to your sales process, and you're just educating the prospect that you're not trying to sell to them, especially not with them being shut down and with the virus and everything like that. But this could be a time for you to at least have a conversation. And while you fully anticipate that they're not going to buy from you, and that's okay, when they open back up and when life gets back to normal, you guys can pick back up, and so you're educating them on that process. And so this is by the way, there's a whole webinar training module recording on YouTube on dealing with objections, and the same approach is used in normal times. It's modified a bit here with a few words just to tailor it to the pandemic. But the logic is that the fact that they're shut down is definitely a reason for them not to buy your product or service, but it's not a reason not to talk. In fact, the state of them being shut down makes it almost a great time to talk if you're really selling the conversation, because they're probably more available now than during regular times, or when everything is all good, when their business is operating at 100%. Now, I wouldn't use that as my objection response, which is, oh, but you have time now because you're shut down, so we should talk. So you're not trying to overcome them and talk them into talking to you, but you can educate them on, I'm not selling anything, just looking to have a conversation. Hey, we'll keep it brief, and this way, when you do get back to life as normal, you can know who we are and how we can help. A slightly different objection that you should be prepared for, because of the economic hit that a lot of businesses are experiencing, is we don't have budget or money right now. This comes up anyways when times are good, and you might be prepared to face this more frequently now. So this response is very similar to what I just shared with you, and the key to understanding really how to memorize this response and also turn it into your own words is to understand the logic that these words are wrapped around. And the logic is, again, the fact that they don't have budget or money is not a reason to not have a conversation. It's a reason for them not to buy from you, but your goal is not to sell to them. Your goal is just to have a conversation because you're selling the meeting. So you can deflect in the same way, and this one is modified just a little bit because of the objection, but they said we don't have any budget right now because of the pandemic. We're barely trying to stay alive. Hey, I understand, and to be honest, I want you to know I'm not trying to sign you up or sell you anything here today. We are just looking to open the dialogue between our two companies. Are you available for just a brief conversation to discuss how we've helped some other small businesses to decrease the cost of goods sold? Trust me, we'll keep in mind that you don't have budget to spend, and we won't spend too much of anybody's time. Not only not spend too much of your time, we won't spend too much of our time because we know that you do not have budget right now. But if we can at least have a brief conversation, that way when your budget opens back up and becomes more available, you can know who we are and how we can help. Is that fair? Can we put a brief call in the calendar? Another objection, and again, these objections come up normally, but you're likely to get the objection of we're just focused on the pandemic right now, or we're just focused on trying to stay alive. Call me in 6 months and maybe that will be a better time to talk, right? You typically, when a prospect gives you this objection, they are thinking that your goal is to try to sell your product. And either they don't think that they'll ever want your product and they're just trying to kick the can down the road and get rid of you, or they genuinely think in 6 months it will be a better time for me to buy your product. But remember, the sales process, we're not trying to sell the product, we're trying to sell the conversation. So typically, the fact that they want you to call back in 6, 10, 12 months, which is a better time for them to buy your product, is not in line with what you're trying to achieve. You're trying to have a conversation. So a response to that could be, hey, I understand and I want you to know I'm actually not reaching out to try to sign you up for anything or sell you anything, especially during this difficult time. I'm simply trying to open the dialogue between our two companies. Are you available for a brief conversation where we can discuss how we've helped some other businesses to stay alive during the pandemic and the economic downturn? That way, when in 6 months or when you're ready to when you're more available or whatever the reason is for you to call them back, you can include that. That way, when you are more clear on your business future, you can then know who we are and how we can help, and then we can pick discussions back up. Then, how does that sound? Are you free for a brief conversation? So that's pretty much it. I know that's the good thing here is short webinar today. I wish I had more tips to give you. I know it's just a challenging time for all of us. I mean, the reality is that sales is challenging. There's tremendous competition. It's difficult to get hold of people. And the pandemic just adds complexity on top of that. So I wish I had more to give you, but I definitely just wanted to share a few thoughts really around, having the right tone, modifying your message, focusing on the sales process, maybe incorporating new tools to help you through this, and being prepared. And most importantly, probably I wanted to give you some thoughts on how to deal with those pandemic-related objections. So if you want more help, everything I showed you here today, Feed is really an extension of other training modules on sales process, training modules on messaging, call scripts, cold emailing, and objection handling. And if you want to dig into those, if you missed those, I'd encourage you to go to YouTube and look for our YouTube channel. And while you're there, if you think any of these tips have been helpful, while you're there, if you can like, comment, share, subscribe, that's one easy way for you to return the love and return the help, and it doesn't cost you anything. If you're ready to go to the next level and you want to incorporate some of the things we've shown you here today and go beyond what's on YouTube, what we basically offer is what I call the Smart Sales System. So, our company name is Sales Scripter, and a lot of what we sell is subscriptions to Sales Scripter. But that's just one piece of a system that we provide. And basically, the SMART sales system, SMART stands for sales messaging and response tactics. And we basically provide a system that makes it extremely easy for you to know what to do, what to say, and what to not do at all the different steps of the sales process and sales prospecting. And so the way to incorporate the system, it's basically like a three-legged stool. And leg one is sales methodology. So a lot of what I shared with you here today is are snippets from our sales methodology. If you want to access the full methodology, it is on YouTube as well. There's a whole playlist called the Smart Sales System Training Program. It's all on YouTube for free. We actually give away our sales training for free, and we do that because our business model is actually to sell our software platform called Sales Scripter. And so Sales Scripter includes a sales message builder to go through those steps that I shared with you of brainstorming your value, brainstorming your pain points and questions, and then the message builder uses your message to fill in a library of scripts, cold call scripts, email templates, and whatnot. And there's also CRM functionality and email automation. And so the third leg is professional services. So certainly we will work with you one-on-one, either through consulting or coaching, helping you to get your stuff set up, get your system implemented and created, or work with you on an ongoing basis from a coaching standpoint. That's pretty much it. Here's my contact info if you have any questions.